Hi everyone, Guy from Midwinter Minis here, and this is episode 2 of my paternity leave video series. Basically a chance for me to take some time off now that the twins have arrived, but also for me to show you some of my absolute favourite hobby creators on YouTube. First up, Sebastian from Atmoseeker is going to show you how to bring your battlefields to life with some simple but effective lighting techniques.
Thanks Guy. Hey everyone, my name's Sebastian from Atmoseeker, and I'm going to be looking at getting the most out of your terrain with some lighting effects. Often with a terrain board, lots of work is put into the models and crafting, but I also try to consider the staging and lighting. This is the stage on which our heroes and villains battle to the death. Dramatic lighting can transform even extremely simple terrain into a cinematic role-playing experience. This is just a portable setup that I've put together. I won't go into the fine specifics about the lights themselves, but more the principles associated with them and how they can dramatically change the look of your terrain. You can achieve similar effects with alternative models of lights. The first step is to create the general ambient light for the board. This will help unify the terrain on the board and set the general tone. Here, I have a pair of pocket RGB video lights mounted on selfie stands opposite each other. Most lights of this kind come with a smartphone app where you can control the hue and intensity. When picking the colors, it's helpful to think of what light would be motivated in your scene. Is it a specific location, or are you trying to evoke a particular mood or energy? It's better to not saturate it in one particular color, but rather have the colors complement each other and fill in the dark shadows. Up here, mounted at the back, I have a couple of spotlights. I'm using these to create a brighter focal area in a part of the board where the main action is. On this one, I'm using a modifier called a snoot to narrow the light beam into a spotlight. The second one is being used as an edge light to highlight shapes and forms on the board. In addition to the general lighting, it's good to have some feature lighting to add some visual interest to simulate practical lighting in terrain. These remote control LED tea lights are some great compact lights that can fit in and around terrain. They come in useful to add some focus areas on the board, especially if you're not handy at wiring lights into terrain. Since terrain and miniatures are inherently static, adding some movement with effects is a great way to make a board feel alive and animated. At the back here, I use an RGB wavelight that creates a rippled moving effect that's great for simulating effects like water, snow and wind, and fire and lava. Those are some of the basic lighting techniques that are great for modifying terrain into a variety of situations and locations. Especially if you add some ambient sound effects and fog, this will truly turn your encounters into an immersive atmospheric experience. Thanks for having me. Back to you, Guy.
That's pretty awesome, Sebastian, but now my Amazon wishlist has mysteriously got a little bit bigger. Next up, Hert from Dark Matter Workshop is going to do his very best to gross you out with some insanely good gore effects.
Welcome to the workshop, my name is Gert and I want to share with you my favorite PVA glue trick. Before we get to that good stuff, 2 quick tips regarding PVA glue. Buy fast drying glue, you can thank me later. Check if the glue is still good and hasn't expired. It's a joke. I made it up and you fell for it like the fascist you are. Okay, first thing we need is something to attach the gore effects to. So I cast up in here from a baby doll with some blue stuff and I filled it up with air drying clay. Family friendly content is a key element here on Dark Matter Workshop. After sufficient drying time for the air drying clay, it's finally time for the flesh texture. I'm going to apply a coat of PVA glue and I smear it open to all the places that I want the texture to be. The second ingredient we will be needing is super glue, which we are going to mix, poke, stir and indeed incorporate into the PVA glue to make our fleshy texture that is going to make everybody gag when we place it on the battle table. Most excellent indeed. And subtlety is overrated anyway. I like to do this kind of stuff in small segments, add a couple drops of super glue, mix it in thoroughly and continue till you're happy with the result. Of course you can't really see the texture, so let's add some paint. For the paint job I started with a grey primer and then a base coat with Fire Slayer Flesh contrast color, and I also use a bit of medium to taper the colors out. to get a gradient happening from lighter to darker. I also like to add some darker spots with a bit more paint here and there. And then another favorite when it comes to flesh, gore and blood effects is red ink. And at the end I'm also going to add a bit of black ink to finish up the paint job nicely. The only thing that is left to say is a big thank you to Guy for this wonderful opportunity. I'm telling you, man, children are awesome. The amount of toys you can steal from them and make cool stuff with, fantastic. Hello? Clowns to the left of me. Context. So this is the first level for a custom D&D boss that I'm making. And this is level 4. Cute, huh?
Oh man, that's pure nightmare fuel. Remember to check out my pinned comment and also the video description if you want to find links to all these cool channels that I'm showing you. Next up, Miss Minilife is going to show you how to make awesome see-through stained glass windows at scale model sizes. Pretty useful for Warhammer terrain.
Hi guys, I'm Miss Minilife, and I have a question for you. Have you ever tried UV resin? I am such a big fan of this stuff. I feel like I use it in every project, and I've thought up a little tutorial for you guys that'll give you a chance to give it a try. So today we're gonna make some stained glass windows. I quickly made a window out of cardstock for demonstration purposes, but you will need a window to start with. Obviously, you're going to need some ultraviolet resin, or UV resin for short. You'll need an ultraviolet light source to cure the resin. Some of the most common sources are black lights, like blacklight flashlights, and nail curing manicure lights. To color the resin, you will need acrylic paints, you'll need some wax paper, and you're going to need some super glue. Oh, and a toothpick or something, just to mix it all together. So step 1 is to tape down your window. Make sure it is flat and no resin can leak underneath there. Then combine your resin and your acrylic paint. Play around with this a little bit because you can get different results the more or less acrylic paint you use. Usually less will give you more transparent windows and more will give you more opaque windows. Once you've combined the resin and paint together, take a little glop of that and plop it into the center of one of your window panes. And then spread it to the edges so that it touches the frame. At this point, you can go ahead and cure the resin. I would do this as you go along just so that it doesn't get super messy. But leave a few panes open because we're gonna put the shattered glass there. And to make the shattered glass, you wanna cure a little bit of resin off on the side on its own, and then peel it up, cut it into jagged little pieces, and super glue it along the inside of one of the frames that we've left open. And that's it. Super easy, but now we have stained glass windows. I can see so many different uses for this. Maybe shattered glass that a bullet has just gone through or a bullet is currently going through, but I would love to see what you guys come up with, so don't be afraid to share that. And that's all there is from me, folks. Take it away, Guy.
How cool was that? Now the first one to make a Horus versus Sanguinius stained glass window wins the internet for this year. And finally, another one for the Nurgle fans. Jay and Nick from EonsOfBattle are going to show you how to make easy, swampy, marshy bases.
Jay here, I'm going to show you how to make some Midwestern marsh bases. The first thing I did was I broke out my favorite product, some Crayola Model Magic Soft Squishy modeling material. I tore off chunks with my fingers and applied it to the base to create some raised areas. Once I was happy with my design, I superglued them down. This stuff does take about a day to dry, but you can blast at it with a hairbrush and get it good enough to keep right on rolling. Next, it was time for some sand, so I brushed on some wood glue all over the base. I applied my sand in layers, biggest to smallest, starting with a little sprinkle of coarse sand, filling in my raised areas with some medium grit sand, and then finally dumping fine-grained sand all over everything else. Once those bases were dry, I gave them a black prime through my airbrush, but you could also do this with a rattle can. Then I gave my bases a coat of Vallejo Beastie Brown. I'm using my airbrush to speed things along. Then I gave each base a nice dry brushing of some Vallejo Dark Sand to bring out the texture of the sand grain. Then it was time to give my bases some life, so I watered down some Vallejo Chocolate Brown and some Games Workshop Castellan Green, and I spread it all over the bases. These paints are so thin that they will tint the bases, and it'll do wonders for adding some variety. Now that I've got my dry land finished and looking snazzy, it's time to do my water, and I'm using some cheapo epoxy. I mixed together both halves of some 5-minute epoxy and stirred in just a drop of Vallejo Chocolate Brown. Although this stuff does not have the fancy gimmicks of a tailor-made water effect, it is cheap, it dries fast, and it is available from most stores. I applied this goop to the lowest areas of the base to create my muddy water flowing up against my riverbanks. And to make my water look more like water and less like chocolate syrup, I took some glossy black paint and painted a thin layer of black to make it look like the water was getting deeper. And the nice thing about these epoxies is it does settle smooth, but it does not flow right over the base. With the water done, it's time to add a little foliage, and I'm going to be using these cheap brushes to do it. To make my reeds, I pinched the bristles and then chopped off a clump with my nippers. Then, while keeping a firm grip on the stem, I applied a drop of superglue to the bottom. This will make for one nice bundle. Then I stuck them down to the marsh with a dollop of superglue. I made a bunch so I had enough to really splash them around. Then these bases needed a little bit more grass, so I applied a few dots of static grass using Elmer's glue and some tweezers. With the bases finished, I painted the rims of the base black. Well, the bases are done and looking real nice, but I think they could use a little something. Maybe a critter.
I'm on it.
It's always fun to do a little 3D modeling, and it's especially satisfying to see it created in front of your eyes.
Thanks, Nick. I primed this little fella black and painted him up using some tan, brown, and green I already had on my palette. Then he was ready to go on the base. A drop of Elmer's glue and this little Kermit had a home. And there you have 3 Midwest Marsh bases.
Totally outstanding, they make it look so easy. Huge thanks again to Atmoseeker, Dark Matter Workshop, Miss Minilife, and EonsOfBattle for helping me out and making those quick tips for you all to enjoy. I hope you love them as much as I do, and don't forget to share the love by liking the video and commenting what your favourite tutorial was, and also don't forget to check out and subscribe to all of the channels that contributed. Again, you can find the links in the video description or pinned in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye for now. Are you pooping?